The signal. The darkness of space stretched endlessly beyond the reinforced viewport of Sentinel-9, a listening post stationed at the edge of human-controlled space. Dr. Ilara Voss gazed at the distant stars, her reflection ghostly in the glass. Behind her, banks of monitors glowed with scrolling data, the steady hum of sophisticated equipment filling the otherwise silent room. Another quiet shift, she murmured, taking a sip from her steaming coffee. Sentinel-9 was positioned far from Earth's radio chatter, designed to detect signals from the void, a testament to humanity's enduring curiosity about what might exist beyond their solar system. Ilara had chosen this posting because she preferred solitude. 6 years of scanning the cosmos, and they'd found nothing but background radiation and the occasional pulsar. Some of her colleagues had transferred back to Earth, convinced they were wasting their careers. But Ilara remained, patient, watching, listening. The soft chime of her console interrupted her thoughts. She frowned, setting down her mug and sliding into her chair. The frequency analyzer displayed an anomaly, a pattern that didn't match any known cosmic phenomenon in their database. "Computer, isolate and enhance," she commanded, her heartbeat quickening. The signal grew stronger on her screen, pulsing with a rhythm too regular to be natural. "Run pattern recognition." The AI responded immediately. "Pattern contains mathematical sequences consistent with artificial origin. 98.7% probability of non-human intelligence." Ilara stared at the screen, her mouth suddenly dry. After decades of searching, humanity had found evidence of intelligent alien life, or rather, it had found them. "Where is this coming from?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Signal originates from Ta-Ceti system, approximately 12 light-years from Earth." Ilara's hands trembled as she pressed the emergency protocol button. "This is Dr. Voss at Sentinel-9. Wake up, Director Chen. We have a confirmed first contact signal." Within hours, the quiet research station transformed into a hive of activity. Scientists and military personnel arrived via emergency transport, crowding the once peaceful monitoring center. Director Chen, a stern woman with silver-streaked hair, stood beside Ilara as they played the signal for the gathered specialists. "It's definitely artificial," confirmed Dr. Rayhan Kapoor, the linguistics expert who had arrived from Earth. "And it's not just random transmissions. There's a pattern here that suggests deliberate communication." "Can we decode it?" Director Chen asked. Rayhan nodded slowly. "The mathematical sequences appear to be a primer, a way to establish common understanding before actual communication. It's exactly what we would do if we were trying to contact an alien civilization." For 3 days, they worked without rest. More signals came, each stronger than the last. Whatever was sending them seemed increasingly desperate. On the 4th day, Rayhan made the breakthrough. "I've got it," he announced, his eyes wide with excitement. The room fell silent as he pulled up the translation on the main screen. "It's a message, and it's alarming." The translated text appeared before them. "Urgent. Civilization in peril. The harvesters approach your system. We monitored your species, warlike but innovative. Our peaceful ways failed against them. Your violence may save us all. Coordinates attached. Help us." "They're asking for our help," Ilara whispered. "But against what?" Further signals arrived, carrying more information. The senders called themselves the Astrines, a species that had achieved interstellar travel centuries before humans. They had established colonies across several star systems, including Ta-Ceti. Their civilization was built on principles of harmony and cooperation, having outgrown warfare thousands of years ago. But 20 Earth years earlier, they had encountered the Harvesters, a relentless collective organism that moved from system to system, stripping planets of resources and consuming all biomass before moving on. The Astrians, with their pacifist philosophy, had been unable to resist. Now only a few of their colonies remained, and they were running out of time. "Why us?" General Rivera asked during the emergency United Earth Council meeting. The holographic projection of the Astrine signal floated above the center of the table. They admit they've been watching us for decades. They call us warlike, but now they want our help. Because they need exactly what they feared about us, Ilara replied. She had been brought to Earth to present her findings. Their message is clear. They need our capacity for warfare, our understanding of violence. They need the very thing they once judged us for. The council chamber erupted in debate. Some argued that this was humanity's chance to prove itself on the galactic stage. Others insisted it could be a trap, or that Earth should focus on defending itself when the harvesters eventually arrived. The Astrines have included detailed star charts, Ilara continued, projecting a new image above the table. The harvesters move in a straight line through space. After they finish with the Astrines, guess where that line points? The room fell silent, as everyone understood the implication. Earth. Whether we help the Astrines or not, the harvesters will come for us eventually, she concluded. Their data suggests we have maybe 2 years before they reach our solar system. General Rivera stood. Then perhaps we should introduce ourselves properly. He turned to the council president. I recommend we activate Project Thunderbolt. A collective murmur filled the chamber. Project Thunderbolt had been controversial since its inception, a contingency plan that maintained advanced military technology in dormant facilities throughout the solar system, weapons deemed too destructive for peaceful times. Those weapons were sealed away for good reasons, argued Councillor Dias. And now we have an equally good reason to unseal them, Rivera countered. The Astrines contacted us precisely because of our capacity for warfare. If we're going to fight these harvesters, we should use every advantage we have. The council vote was close, but in the end, the decision was clear. Humanity would respond to the Astrine call for help. As Ilara left the council chamber, General Rivera approached her. Dr. Voss, I want you to join the response team. You made first contact. You should see this through. I'm a scientist, not a soldier, she protested. Rivera's expression remained firm. This mission will need both. The Nemesis will be ready to launch in 3 weeks. I've already assigned Commander Hayes to lead the expedition. The Nemesis? Ilara asked. I thought that ship was decommissioned. It was never decommissioned, Rivera corrected her. Just hidden away. Like many things we hoped we'd never need again. Across the solar system, dormant military facilities awakened. On Mars, engineers removed dust covers from massive hangars built into the red planet's surface. On Europa, weapon researchers pulled classified files from secure archives. In Earth orbit, shipyards that had been converted to civilian use began retooling for war. Humanity had enjoyed a century of relative peace, but the machinery of war had never been completely dismantled, merely set aside, just in case. Now that foresight would be put to the test. 2 weeks later, Ilara stood in the observation deck of the lunar shipyard, watching as the final preparations were made to the UES Nemesis. The warship was unlike anything in the current Earth fleet, a kilometer-long behemoth with a sleek predatory design. Its black hull absorbed light rather than reflecting it, bristling with weapon ports and sensor arrays. Impressive, isn't she? A deep voice said from behind her. Ilara turned to find a tall, broad-shouldered man in a naval uniform. His face was weathered, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of both laughter and hardship. Commander Hayes, I presume, she replied, extending her hand. He nodded, shaking her hand firmly. And you're Dr. Voss, the one who heard the call. His expression turned serious, ready to make history. Ilara looked back at the Nemesis, a mixture of dread and determination settling in her stomach. For better or worse, humanity was about to announce itself to the galaxy, not with a message of peace, but with the thunder of war. What if we're making a mistake? She asked quietly. What if they're wrong about us? About what we can do? Hayes considered her question for a moment. The Astrines monitored us for decades before deciding to contact us. They saw something in humanity that they needed, something they didn't have. Our history is filled with conflict, but also with resilience. Maybe that's what they're counting on. As they watched, the massive engines of the Nemesis began to glow, the ship coming to life like a waking giant. The fleet will be ready to depart in 3 days. Hayes continued. We'll take a direct route to Ta City. If the Estrenes are still there, we'll establish contact and assess the situation. If not, he trailed off. If not, then we're already too late, Ilara finished. Hayes nodded grimly. Let's hope we're not. Humanity has always wondered if we're alone in the universe. Now we know we're not. His eyes hardened as he looked at the warship. And soon, these harvesters will know they're not alone either. Across Earth, citizens watched news reports about the diplomatic mission to Ta City. Few knew the full truth, that humanity was gearing up for its first interstellar war. But as the massive ships rose from their hidden bases, a sense of purpose spread throughout human space. After centuries of looking to the stars and wondering, humanity was about to take its place among them. For better or worse, the sleeping giant had awakened. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity's war engine was unleashed. The response. The void between stars stretched before the human fleet like an endless ocean. At the center of the formation, the UES Nemesis led the way, flanked by 4 heavy cruisers and a dozen smaller support vessels. Their engines burned with cold blue fire, propelling them toward the Ta City system at speeds once thought impossible. On the bridge of the Nemesis, Commander Darius Hayes stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching as the stars streaked past on the main view screen. The ship had been his home for 2 weeks now, ever since they departed from Earth orbit. Status report, he ordered, his voice cutting through the low hum of the ship's systems. All systems nominal, Commander, replied Lieutenant Santos from the operations console. We're maintaining maximum speed. Estimated arrival at Ta City in 17 hours. Hayes nodded. And the fleet, holding formation. The Valiant reports minor fluctuations in their starboard engine array, but nothing critical. Tell them to run a level 3 diagnostic. I want all ships at full capability when we arrive. Hayes turned to his communications officer. Any response to our hails? Nothing yet, sir. We've been broadcasting on the frequencies provided by the Estrenes, but no reply. Hayes frowned. The lack of response could mean many things, none of them good. Either the Estrenes had already been overwhelmed, or they were being cautious until they confirmed the approaching ships were actually human. Keep trying. I'm going to check on our guest. He found Dr. Ilara Voss in the ship's observation lounge, surrounded by holographic displays showing the decoded Estrene messages. Despite not being military, she had adapted well to life aboard the warship, earning respect from the crew for her keen insights and tireless work ethic. Any new revelations? Hayes asked, approaching her workstation. Ilara looked up, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept much. I've been analyzing the linguistic patterns in their later messages. There's something they're not telling us about these harvesters. Such as, she gestured to one of the displays. Their descriptions are inconsistent. Sometimes they refer to the harvesters as them, other times as it. Sometimes they describe attacks from multiple directions, and other times they talk about a single advancing front. Hayes leaned closer, studying the translated text. You think they're being deliberately vague. Not vague, Ilara corrected. I think they don't fully understand what they're facing. The Estrenes evolved without predators on their home world. Their psychology doesn't include concepts of hunting or being hunted. Before Hayes could respond, the ship's alert system activated. Commander to the bridge, came Lieutenant Santos's voice over the comm. We've detected something. Hayes and Ilara rushed to the bridge, where the main screen now displayed a magnified image of space ahead of them. Small objects moved against the backdrop of stars, their forms indistinct at this distance. Analysis, Hayes demanded. Some kind of debris field, sir, Santos replied. Metallic composition, consistent with spacecraft fragments. And She hesitated. "We're picking up energy signatures similar to those described in the Astrian data. Harvester signatures." Hayes' expression hardened. "Battle stations. Bring weapons online and inform the fleet." He turned to Ilara. "Looks like we might make first contact sooner than expected." The debris field grew larger as they approached. What had appeared as indistinct objects now took shape. The broken remains of Astrian ships, torn apart by weapons of terrifying power. Among the wreckage, smaller ships moved with insectile precision, methodically extracting materials from the destroyed vessels. "Those must be harvester scavenger units," Ilara said quietly, watching the screen with horror. Hayes studied the tactical display. "They're small, probably automated. No sign of larger vessels yet." He turned to his weapons officer. "Target the nearest scavenger. Low-yield energy pulse, just enough to get their attention." The Nemesis fired, a brilliant beam of energy lancing across space to strike one of the scavenger ships. The small vessel disintegrated instantly, the energy far more destructive than anticipated. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as one, the remaining scavengers ceased their activity and oriented toward the human fleet. "They're scanning us," Santos reported, her voice tight with tension. "Let them look," Hayes replied. "I want them to know what they're dealing with." The scavengers remained motionless for several seconds, then abruptly changed course, accelerating away from the debris field at remarkable speed. "They're retreating," Ilara observed. "No," Hayes corrected. "They're reporting back. We just announced our presence." He turned to his tactical officer. "Track them. I want to know where they're going." The fleet continued forward, passing through the graveyard of Astrian ships. The scale of destruction was sobering. Dozens of vessels torn apart, their crews presumably lost. Ilara watched in silence, feeling the weight of what they were facing. "Commander," called the communications officer suddenly. "We're receiving a transmission. It's using the Astrian communication protocols." "On screen," Hayes ordered. The view screen shifted to show a being unlike anything humans had seen before. Its body glowed with a soft blue-green light, vaguely resembling an upright jellyfish, with multiple delicate appendages. 3 large eyes were arranged in a triangular pattern above what might have been a mouth. "Humans." It spoke, the translation system converting its melodious tones to English. "You have come." Hayes stepped forward. "I am Commander Darius Hayes of the United Earth ship Nemesis. We received your distress call and have come to render assistance." The Astrian's body pulsed with brighter light. "I am Sentinel Lyra. Our outpost detected your approach but feared it might be a harvester deception. We have been greatly reduced since our messages reached you." "We noticed," Hayes replied grimly. "Those ships we encountered, they were harvester scouts." "Resource extractors," Lyra corrected. "The true harvesters are far more terrible. They will have sensed the destruction of their drone and will come to investigate." The alien's glow dimmed noticeably. "You should follow us to our sanctuary. It is not safe to remain here." The Astrian sanctuary turned out to be a massive space station hidden within an asteroid field orbiting a gas giant in the Ta City system. Its design was unlike human architecture, organic curves and flowing lines that made the station appear almost grown rather than built. As the human fleet took up defensive positions around the sanctuary, Hayes and Ilara, along with a small delegation, boarded the station to meet with the Astrian Leadership Council. The interior of the station matched its exterior, corridors that seemed to pulse with life, lighting that adjusted organically to their presence, and gravity that shifted subtly as they moved. They were led to a large chamber where a dozen Astrians awaited them, their bodies glowing with various intensities. "We welcome you to what remains of our civilization in this system," spoke one Astrian whose light pulsed more vibrantly than the others. "I am Elder Nema, voice of the Refuge Council." Hayes performed a formal bow following the protocol established by xenoanthropologists back on Earth. "We come in friendship and alliance. Earth stands ready to assist you against the harvester threat." The Astrian's colors shifted in what Ilara recognized as their equivalent of emotional expression, a mixture of hope and apprehension. "We have monitored your species for many cycles," Elder Nema replied. "We feared your violent tendencies, your conflicts, your weapons of destruction. Now we must rely on those very qualities." The Elder's glow dimmed. "It brings us great sadness. Sometimes survival requires difficult choices." Hayes responded diplomatically. "Tell us more about these harvesters. What exactly are we facing?" The Astrians projected a holographic display in the center of the chamber, showing a massive biomechanical entity surrounded by smaller craft. The central mass resembled a colossal jellyfish crossed with an insect hive, pulsing with malevolent red energy. "The harvesters are a collective consciousness," explained Elder Nema. "Each component serves the whole. They consume all organic matter and useful resources before moving to the next system. They cannot be reasoned with or appealed to. They know only consumption and growth." Ilara studied the projection intently. "You mentioned they're a collective. Do they have a central intelligence, a controlling node?" "We believe so, though we have never been able to identify it," another Astrian answered. "They adapt quickly to our defenses. Each encounter makes them stronger as they incorporate our technology into themselves." "Like us," Ilara murmured, drawing curious looks from both humans and Astrians. "Humans have always learned from our conflicts. We study our enemies, adapt our strategies. It's how we've survived." Elder Nema floated closer. "Perhaps that is why they fear you." "They fear us?" Hayes asked sharply. "They know about humans. The harvesters have extensive sensory capabilities," Nema explained. "They have detected your transmissions, just as we did. But unlike us, they altered their course to avoid your system. Until now." A sudden alert interrupted the meeting. An Astrian rushed into the chamber, its body flashing with urgent patterns of light. "Elder Council, the Sentinels report multiple harvester vessels entering the system. They will reach our position in 6 hours." Hayes immediately activated his communicator. "Nemesis, this is Hayes. Battle stations. Prepare all ships for combat engagement." He turned back to the Astrians. "How many civilians do you have on this station?" "Nearly 30,000. Elder Nema replied, lights pulsing with alarm. "All that remain of our population in this system. Then we need to evacuate them immediately," Hayes stated. "Do you have transport ships?" "Some, but not enough for everyone." Hayes nodded grimly. "Then we'll use ours as well. Commander Phillips," he said, addressing his second-in-command via communicator, "begin evacuation protocols. Coordinate with the Astrians to transfer civilians to our support vessels." "Where will we go?" asked Elder Nema. "For now, behind the gas giant. It will provide cover while we engage the harvesters." Hayes' expression was resolute. "You asked for our help. This is what we do." As the evacuation began, Ilara joined Hayes in the tactical center established aboard the sanctuary. The human fleet was repositioning, the 4 cruisers forming a defensive perimeter, while smaller vessels began shuttling Astrian civilians to safety. "You're planning to confront them directly," Ilara observed. "Is that wise? We don't know their full capabilities yet." Hayes studied the tactical display, where red markers indicated the approaching harvester vessels. "Sometimes the only way to gather intelligence is through direct engagement. Besides," he added, his voice dropping slightly, "we need to see what we're up against. If these harvesters are as adaptable as the Astrians claim, we need to know their baseline capabilities before they start incorporating our technology." The first visual confirmation of the harvester fleet sent a chill through the command center. The vessels matched the Astrian projections, but were far larger than anticipated. The central ship, if it could be called that, was massive, nearly twice the size of the Nemesis, surrounded by dozens of smaller craft that moved in perfect, unnaturally coordinated patterns. "They're scanning the sanctuary," reported Lieutenant Santos from the Nemesis. "They've detected the evacuation." Hayes' jaw tightened. "Then we can't wait any longer. All ships, Execute attack pattern Epsilon. Target the smaller vessels first. Let's see how they respond when their drones are threatened. The human fleet moved with practiced precision, breaking from their defensive positions to engage the approaching harvesters. Energy weapons lanced across space, striking the smaller harvester craft with devastating effect. Several exploded immediately, while others spun out of control, disabled by the unexpected ferocity of the attack. For a moment, it seemed the battle might be quickly decided. Then the harvester vessels reorganized, shifting into new formations with frightening speed. The smaller craft began sacrificing themselves, deliberately intercepting human weapons fire to protect the larger vessels. "They're adapting," Ilara observed, watching the tactical display with growing concern. Hayes nodded grimly. "Not just adapting. Learning. They're analyzing our attack patterns." He activated his communicator. "All ships, break formation. Individual captains, choose your own targets and attack vectors. No coordination." Across the battlefield, human vessels suddenly changed course, each pursuing its own unpredictable path. The harvester swarm seemed momentarily confused, their perfect coordination becoming a liability as they attempted to counter multiple unpredictable threats simultaneously. "It's working," Ilara said, a note of hope in her voice. "For now," Hayes replied. "But they'll adapt to this too, eventually." He turned to an Astrine observer. "How much longer until the evacuation is complete?" "At least 2 more hours," the Astrine answered, its glow pulsing with anxiety. Hayes' expression hardened as he watched the massive central harvester vessel begin to move, its surface rippling as new structures emerge, organic weapons growing before their eyes. "We might not have 2 hours," he said quietly. "This is just the beginning." The Crucible. Red emergency lighting bathed the bridge of the Nemesis as the massive warship shuddered under another impact. Commander Hayes gripped the edge of the tactical console, watching as damage reports scrolled across the screen. "Port shields at 43%, reported Lieutenant Santos, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Hull breach on deck 17, emergency containment holding." The battle had raged for nearly 3 hours, far longer than anyone had anticipated. What had begun as a holding action to cover the Astrine evacuation had evolved into a desperate struggle for survival. "Status of the evacuation," Hayes demanded. "Final transports are loading now," replied his communications officer. "Estimated time to completion, 15 minutes. Hayes nodded grimly. 15 minutes might as well be an eternity in the current situation. The initial advantage of human unpredictability had eroded as the harvesters adapted. Their smaller vessels now mimicked the chaotic attack patterns of the human fleet, while the central ship, the Hive, as they had taken to calling it, continued to spawn new combat forms. "Sir," called Santos suddenly, "the Valiant reports their engines are failing. They're losing maneuverability." Hayes looked at the tactical display. The Valiant, one of their 4 cruisers, had positioned itself between the Hive and the Sanctuary, taking heavy fire in the process. "Order them to withdraw immediately," he commanded. "The Nemesis will cover." Too late, Santos interrupted, her voice hollow. Multiple harvester vessels converging on their position. On the main view screen, they watched as the Valiant fought desperately, its weapons blazing against the swarming attackers. For a moment, it seemed the cruiser might break free. Then a coordinated strike from 3 harvester vessels tore through its weakened shields. The proud ship broke apart, secondary explosions rippling along its hull as its reactor containment failed. The bridge fell silent. 400 crew, gone in an instant. "They're adapting too quickly," Ilara said, breaking the silence. She had remained on the bridge throughout the battle, her analytical skills proving valuable as they attempted to counter harvester tactics. "Each engagement teaches them more about our weapons, our defenses." Hayes' expression hardened. "Then we need to show them something they haven't seen yet." He activated the ship-wide communication system. "This is the commander. Prepare the Helios device." Ilara's eyes widened. "The Helios?" That's still experimental technology. So was most of this ship before we reactivated it, Hayes replied grimly. We're out of options. Deep within the Nemesis, engineers prepared the weapon that had been deemed too dangerous for conventional warfare, a gravitational singularity generator designed to create a localized disruption in spacetime. Theoretical models suggested it could tear apart anything caught in its effect radius. Evacuation status? Hayes asked. Final transport departing now, came the reply. All Astrian civilians clear of the sanctuary. Hayes nodded. All ships, execute withdrawal pattern Delta. Fall back behind the gas giant. He turned to his weapons officer. Target the hive. Wait until our fleet is at minimum safe distance, then fire. As the human vessels disengage, the harvesters pressed their advantage, clearly sensing victory. Their smaller craft swarmed forward while the hive moved toward the abandoned sanctuary, organic tendrils extending from its surface to begin the consumption process. They're taking the bait, Ilara observed. Helios device charged and ready, reported the weapons officer. Fleet at safe distance. Hayes took a deep breath. Fire. The Nemesis shuddered as the weapon discharged, a barely visible distortion rippling through space toward the harvester hive. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then reality itself appeared to fold around the massive vessel. Space warped, twisting in impossible ways as the gravitational singularity took hold. The effect was catastrophic. The hive convulsed, its organic components stretching and compressing as they were caught in competing gravitational forces. Smaller harvester vessels were pulled toward the distortion, crashing into each other or being torn apart by the increasing strain. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the effect collapsed in on itself. A blinding flash of energy erupted where the hive had been, sending a shockwave through the surrounding space. When the sensors cleared, all that remained was scattered debris. Direct hit, the weapons officer reported, unable to keep a note of awe from his voice. Target destroyed. A cheer went up from the bridge crew, but Hayes remained solemn. Damage assessment, he ordered. The Helios discharge damaged our main propulsion system, Santos replied after a moment. We're limited to auxiliary power until repairs can be completed. Several other ships reporting similar effects. Hayes nodded. The Helios weapon had been even more powerful than anticipated, and more dangerous to its users. Commander, called the sensor officer urgently, we're detecting new energy signatures, multiple contacts entering the system. The celebration died instantly as the main screen updated to show dozens of new harvester vessels appearing at the system's edge, a second wave, larger than the first. How? Ilara whispered. How could they respond so quickly? The answer came from an unexpected source. Elder Nema's voice transmitted from one of the evacuation ships. The hive you destroyed was merely an extension, a probe sent to test your capabilities. The true harvester consciousness has observed and learned from your victory. Hayes's expression darkened as he understood the implications. They sacrificed that entire force just to analyze our weapons and tactics. The tactical display painted a grim picture. The human fleet, damaged from the first engagement and affected by the Helios discharge, would be no match for this new force. Retreat seemed the only option, but with damaged propulsion systems, they couldn't outrun the approaching enemy. Sir, said Santos quietly, the Astrians are requesting instructions. Their ships are even more vulnerable than ours. Hayes studied the display, considering their dwindling options. Then, unexpectedly, Ilara stepped forward. Commander, I've been analyzing the data from both encounters, she said, her voice urgent. There's a pattern in how the harvesters communicate with their drones. I think I can disrupt it. Hayes turned to her. Explain. The Harvester Collective uses a form of quantum entanglement for instantaneous communication across distances. It's how they coordinate so perfectly. She brought up a schematic on one of the displays. If we modify our communication arrays to broadcast on these frequencies, we might be able to introduce enough noise to temporarily break their connection, like jamming their communications. More than that, Ilara continued. I think we can actually feed false data into their network, make them see threats that aren't there, or miss threats that are. It was a desperate plan, but they had few alternatives. As the second harvester wave approached, the human fleet scrambled to implement Ilara's modifications. The damaged engines were actually an advantage in disguise. The energy radiation from the affected systems provided the perfect carrier for the disruption signal. When the harvesters came within range, Hayes gave the order to activate the modified arrays. The effect wasn't immediately visible, but sensors soon detected unusual movement patterns among the enemy vessels. Some stopped completely, while others began moving in random directions. Several even fired upon their own companions. "It's working," Ilara confirmed, monitoring the data streams. "But they're already attempting to adjust their communication frequencies. We have minutes at most." Hayes didn't hesitate. "All ships, concentrate fire on the largest vessels. Everything we got." What followed was the most coordinated attack of the entire engagement. Human warships targeted specific vulnerabilities they had identified during the first battle, focusing their remaining weapons on critical points of the harvester vessels. Without their perfect coordination, the enemy couldn't effectively counter the assault. 3 of the larger harvester ships exploded in rapid succession, sending debris cascading through their formation. A 4th listed heavily, its propulsion systems failing as human weapons fire tore through its organic hull. But the advantage wouldn't last. Already, some harvester vessels were regaining coordination, adapting to the disruption. Time was running out. "Sir," called Santos, "I'm receiving a transmission from the Astrine command ship. Elder Nema wishes to speak with you." Hayes nodded, and the Astrine leader's image appeared on the screen. The Elder's glow was dimmer than before, a sign of grave concern. "Commander Hayes," Nema began, "we have observed your brave defense. Now we must offer our own contribution." The Astrine paused. "Our remaining ships contain technology that can generate a temporal stasis field, a bubble in which time passes differently. We developed it for scientific research, not warfare." Hayes understood immediately. "You're suggesting we use it to trap the harvesters?" "Yes, but the effect requires enormous energy. To create a field large enough to ensnare the entire harvester fleet." Naima's glow pulsed with sorrow. "The generating ships must be at the center of the effect. They will be trapped as well." Silence fell over the bridge as the implication became clear. The Astrines were offering to sacrifice themselves to save both species. "There must be another way," Hayes began, but Nema interrupted. "This is our choice, Commander. You came to our aid knowing little about us, risking your lives for our survival. Now it is our turn to demonstrate courage." The Elder's glow brightened with resolve. "We ask only that you protect those of our people who have been evacuated." Before Hayes could respond, the Astrine ships began moving, forming a tight formation directly in the path of the advancing harvesters. Energy readings from their vessels spiked dramatically. "What are they doing?" Santos asked. "Something we would have done in their place," Hayes replied quietly. "All ships, maximum reverse thrust. Get clear of the projected effect radius." On the view screen, they watched as the harvester vessels converged.